Well, Dr. O'Neill began his career here at Southwestern 31 years ago, having come from Wesley College and before that Tulane University. Tim has been the holder of the Tower Hester Chair. He has taught courses about American politics, including the very popular introductory course, which has attracted a large number of non-majors. Within American politics, Tim has offered a variety of courses: constitutional law, law and politics, legislative politics, religion and politics, political ethics, among others. He has also taught and supervised our internship program at the Capitol in Austin. Dr. O'Neill has provided immense service to both the department and university. I don't want to list everything that he has done. We'll be here for a long time, but let me just mention a few things. Tim was chair of the political science department. He was chair of the social science division. He supervised Southwestern's very successful Washington semester. He was the pre-law advisor and advisor to Student Congress. Tim right now is working on a textbook on American politics. Beyond these positions, Tim has had his most important role in mentoring a number of students over the years here at Southwestern. I'd like to talk more about this, but we are having a retirement reception in a week and a half, and I'm going to say more about what Tim has done as a mentor at that. So I just want to provide you these introductory remarks, and before we have Tim's last lecture, I'd like to have a few people speak about Tim. My first speaker is President Berger. President Berger, you and I were at this event on Sunday, and Christine Bowman, I think, took about 10 minutes talking about all the awards you've won. So I didn't know what to say, so I just figured I would introduce you as our honorable president, Dr. Edward Berger.
Thank you, Bob, and welcome everybody, and those who are watching this live. I'm so delighted that you're able to join us virtually back on campus for what I know will be a very special lecture, although I don't like the title of this. I don't like the idea that this is Tim's last lecture, and I don't think it actually is going to be Tim's last lecture, but it's his most recent lecture, and so I think we're in for a real treat. It's interesting to think about an educator and the impact that that individual has throughout that career. And if you think about it from a mentoring perspective and from a perspective of just being part of an intellectual community, Dr. O'Neill's contributions really, I think, are countless. Bob already mentioned the fact that he mentored so many students through very high impact experiences outside of the classroom, whether it's in the Capitol in Austin or in the Capitol of Washington, D.C. These are really exceptional experiences that most students wouldn't even have as undergraduates. But I'd like to talk about him just briefly as a mentor outside of the classroom and even outside of political science. He is an engaged member of our community. And I know this personally because I've witnessed this. He is an incredible supporter of all students, including what we sometimes think of as non-traditional students, students who might be a little bit older, and in particular students who have served this country as veterans and are now here at Southwestern. And Tim and I have been to countless events together, and it's always a pleasure to see him there supporting students. And whether it is for Memorial Day, where early in the morning, a few of us come out and we honor individuals who have given so much to this country by lowering the flag and then raising it again, through activities that actually that group has hosted, where he's always there and always supporting. And this transcends even beyond students to the rest of the community. So faculty have had a tradition now for about 15 or so years where once a year we honor the staff, the faculty honors the staff by actually providing them with a breakfast. And Tim is always there, one of the first people to arrive at very early in the morning to serve our colleagues and show appreciation. Gratitude is something that I think is meaningful to Tim, and it is certainly meaningful for all of us as we begin to celebrate the next exciting chapter of his professional life. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy not his last lecture, but the most recent one. Thank you.
Well, the next person I'd like to speak is our dean, Elisa Condor. And Elisa, of course, is a member of the political science department. So Elisa and Tim have interacted for a long time. I forgot to say that Tim came from UC Berkeley, and Elisa came from UC Berkeley. And before Elisa came, I thought that there was some kind of a Berkeley thing. Tim, as you probably all know, has these incredibly colorful socks. For many, many years, you know, he's wearing these strange, bizarre socks. And I thought that it was just a Berkeley thing. But then we hired Elisa, and she never had any strange socks. So I realized, you know, it wasn't a Berkeley thing. It was simply a Tim thing. But anyway, I want to invite our dean and my colleague, Dr. Elisa Condor.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here today to honor Tim. Tim came to Southwestern in 1987, and it's my understanding that he was really a key part of the university's effort to amplify the teacher-scholar model. Tim had an impressive resume when he arrived. He had taught at Tulane and Wellesley, as well as spent a summer at Stanford. He had an award-winning dissertation. He had published in the APSR. That journal is impossible to get an article in, and had a book as well. Throughout his career, he has been committed to an active research agenda, challenging teaching, and engaging in faculty-student work. In my time here, some of the most impressive accomplishments that he's had is how he has engaged students in his work. It is not common to co-author with students in political science, but Tim has done that. He published with Tiffany Barnes in 2006 in the Journal of Political Science, and then more recently with Samantha Shurka, a smaller piece in the Huffington Post. These are just snapshots, though, into the ways that he engages with students and the passion that he has in working with students. Tim, I have had the pleasure of serving on many search committees with Tim, and Tim's hiring philosophy is to hire better than yourself. He has built a political science department of active teacher scholars that reflect his own approach to teaching and research. On a personal note, Tim O'Neill is the first person that I met from Southwestern University. He interviewed me at our meeting and performed a great sales job. And I decided that if everyone dressed like Tim at Southwestern, it was definitely a place where I wanted to be. When I first arrived, Tim, my very first class, was full of his advisees. He was really enthusiastic and helpful in making sure that I would be successful here and in garnering up student interests. Our offices have been side by side for the last 15 years, and I must admit that early in my career, I was at once intimidated and inspired as I listened to him advise our students and work with them, especially the capstone students, and what he could get them to do in his office hours over time. I also spent many sessions on his couch in his office asking about teaching, especially how to organize our capstone, and then later when I became department chair, seeking out all sorts of advice on how to do that. I know I speak for the department in expressing our gratitude for his willingness to engage with us and support us in our careers. As dean, I wish to thank Tim for his work to make the university a stronger place. He has pushed us to be better, and I am confident that as he looks at the activities and the faculty of the activities of the faculty and students today, he can see the impact of his work over the years. As Tim and I both teach introductory classes, we often have students either before or after each other, and for 15 years I've heard about what a fantastic lecturer he is. I have never seen one of his lectures, so I join you today in being quite excited to hear his last lecture.
So our next speaker is Amanda McMillan. She is an SU alum, a member of the Board of Trustees, a former student of Tim. I'm going to have her come up and speak, but I just want to say a few things about her. So she earned her bachelor's degree in political science from Southwestern in 1995, having been elected to Phi Beta Kappa. She has also been affiliated with Alpha Chi and the Student Foundation. She earned her master's and law degrees from Duke University in 1998. Today, Amanda is the Senior Vice President, General Counsel, Corporate Secretary, and Chief Compliance Officer at Anadarko Petroleum Corporation. Since joining Anadarko in 2004, she has held a number of executive positions, including Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary of Western Gas Holdings, an Anadarko subsidiary and general partner of Western Gas Partners. Amanda has practiced corporate law and corporate and securities law at Akin, Gump, Strauss, Hauer, and Fell. Amanda has been active in a number of civic and professional organizations. She is the immediate past president of the board of Houston Arboretum and Nature Center and a member of the advisory board of the River Oaks Chamber Orchestra. Today, Amanda is currently serving on Southwestern's board of trustees. Amanda made a very generous gift to the political science department, allowing faculty members and students to carry out our research. And I want to express on behalf of the political science department our great gratitude. Amanda has embodied the best of Southwestern. She has been incredibly generous and committed to service. So I would like to invite Amanda up here to talk about Tim and to introduce Tim.
Good afternoon. And for those of you joining us online this afternoon, I do have mismatched socks on. You just can't see them. I am so grateful to be here today to introduce Tim O'Neill for his last lecture. Dr. Berger, don't worry. I am confident that Tim O'Neill will never be done lecturing us, whether it's on American politics or probably a number of other topics. As a first-year student here, sometime during the last century, one of my very first classes was American politics, which I think for the alums who are here today and joining us online, many of us have taken. I was also one of Tim's advisees. I wasn't officially in the pre-law program, but obviously I went to law school, as you can tell from my prior degree. I will say, I was trying to think of kind of one statement that I could think of to sum up my experience with Tim and his impact on my career. And I think the best way I can put it is that having a good adversary makes you a better advocate. And in Tim O'Neill, I had a formidable adversary and also a passionate advocate for my interest here at Southwestern. Tim O'Neill drove me crazy when I got here. His classes were very difficult, and my first bad grade I got here was in American politics. I went into his office, I still remember which office it was, in a panic because I'd gotten like a C on something, and clearly delighted that I was frustrated about this. He's like, well, that's a perfectly respectable grade. What's your problem? And that captured probably the beginning of a great relationship. You challenged me, you infuriated me on a regular basis, and you made me a better scholar. You made me a better critical thinker. You made me a better negotiator. And I wouldn't be where I am today without the challenge that you gave me every day inside and outside of the classroom. And for that, I am truly, truly grateful. You also worked hard as an advisor and an advocate to make sure that I could have the best experience possible at Southwestern. Not only did I have the tremendous opportunity to study in London with Dr. Gould, who's here today, and Ken Roberts, there you are, hello. I also had a chance to go do the foreign policy semester at the American University in Washington, D.C., where I was also able to intern for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That wouldn't have happened without Tim's direction and support. And I was also able to go do a joint degree program at Duke University, again, with the wisdom and advice that I received from Tim during my time here at Southwestern. I'm not sure how you survived Berkeley, but I'm really glad you made it to Southwestern. But again, this isn't just, we're not just here for your last lecture, we're also here to thank you. So thank you for challenging us, thank you for demanding more from us, and thank you for making us read The Godfather. Congratulations on whatever comes next for you. And with no further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Timothy J. O'Neill.
Thank you for that extraordinary set of very generous introductions. I hope equally glorified statements will be made at my funeral. But Amanda's presence here and the presence of so many former and some current students reminds me why I love being at Southwestern. It's the students. And not only the students, it's what our students do once they leave Southwestern. We ask our students to prepare themselves to live lives in which they will do well and do good. Doing well entails a prosperous and joy-filled life. Doing good is helping the world to be its best self. And I can look around and see in so many of these former and current students, people have already demonstrated not only that they're going to take care of themselves well, but they have done positive good for Southwestern, for Georgetown, indeed for the world. My wife Lynn and I confess that one of the things that we take greatest pride is that our oldest son is a graduate of Southwestern, married to another graduate of Southwestern, and 2 grandchildren who are preparing to come to Southwestern. And so I know what good you folks do in the world, and I thank you for it. I also want to express my genuine gratitude to all the many hands that were involved in organizing this event. I am truly honored to be asked, and frankly, I hope I live up to your expectations. There is, however, a quandary. Last summer, the local chapter of the Alumni Association asked me to deliver my last lecture. And so I'm thinking, if I offer something totally different today, then I misled them. I gave them my second to the last lecture, which perhaps this will be the third to the last lecture. And so what I've decided, my solution is to offer basically what I told them with enough changes so that I can call this O'Neill's Last Lecture 2.0. The most famous last lecture ever delivered was done by a computer scientist at Carnegie Mellon. When his friends found out that he had only a few months to live, they asked him to give his lecture. Is there something I need to know, honey? Were you going to tell me after? Okay, well, let's hope not. You'll be pleased to learn that I've learned the most important rule for public talks. KISS. Keep it short, stupid. I will comply, and I will leave time for us to talk with, rather than me simply talking to you. There are as many ways to leave a legacy as there are people in this room. Since I'm the speaker, naturally, I'm going to recommend my favorite. Participate in politics. Hardly a surprise. I realized that politics has a terrible reputation. The word conjures up dark visions of corruption, bribery, smoke-filled rooms. And the last presidential election, and the months since then, certainly hasn't changed the public's contempt for politics. How I would love to offer some pointed comments about these events. But decorum prevents me to do this in the formal talk, but I guess everything is available during Q&A. Here is a revolutionary thought. Politics in America is a good and necessary thing. It is the oil that greases the creaky machinery of a government by encouraging responsiveness in a contentious and divided people. It is the glue that holds together a society of continental expanse and stunning variety. Without a doubt, the United States is the most diverse republic in the world, drawing upon people from every corner of the globe, and we are better for that. But without the liberal application of politics, the decentralizing forces and discord generated by diversity threaten to rip up the fabric of our society. Without skillful use of political arts, how could we hope to make our system work when power is divided in so many different ways? Vertically, with layers of national, state, and local government. Horizontally, with the separated institutions of the executive, the legislative, and the courts. I've come to understand that too many Americans misunderstand what good politics is. They imagine it to be a consensus, a kumbaya, grand group hug where we all agree. But life teaches us that reasonable people not only can, but should disagree about important matters. Our awkward system of checks and balances seeks to create incentives for cooperation so that some important jobs will be done, occasionally done well, but also incentives for competition so that the few or the many cannot dominate us. Striking the balance between these two competing goals is the ongoing task of our political system. We seek a government that is fair but effective, that protects our individual liberties, but gets the job of governance done. My concern is that those of us old enough to look back think there was a golden age. It never existed. George Wallace in 1968 said that there wasn't a dime's worth of difference between the two political parties. But the so-called consensus of the 1950s and the 1960s concealed an ideological majority under the cover of bipartisanship. Be it the conservative majority of Southern Democrats and conservative Republicans in the 1950s, or the liberal majority of moderate Republicans and Northern liberals during the 1960s. At least we're honest enough today to actually put R and D after a candidate's name. And that can tell us something important about what that candidate would really do once he or she is in office. We've mislearned the lessons of the past. The word tribalism is pretty popular now to talk about the divisions in our society. I think that's a bad term. I, for one, was not born into a political party. I'm not part of a tribe. I'm part of a fan base to a team. And so we divide ourselves into competing sports teams. And we are loyal to our team regardless of the outcome of the game, because there's always the next game. And this has created what I have called the sin of political self-righteousness. what I believe to be the cardinal sin of our politics. We are convinced that what we and our friends believe is the only right thing to believe. We are so convinced that our opinions are so self-evidently the right and rational ones that when somebody disagrees with us, we respond by outrage. We see the other side not as reasonable people who might have different perspectives. We see the other as evil, or at least under the thumb of sinister special interests. Might I suggest that we can learn more from people we disagree with than with those we agree? More from an articulate opponent than from the echoes of our views in somebody else's voice? I've learned more from my dear friend, Dr. Eric Selbin, a distinguished member of the left, than from my friend, Dr. Fred Sellers, despite the fact that Fred and I share libertarian leanings. I guess that's where I got the idea of challenging. Politics is the means we use to make our nation work and to make our communities better places to live. 2,500 years ago, Aristotle called politics the master science. And by that he meant, at least in the translation I have, that it was the only mechanism by which a community could set priorities amongst all the individual and group interests. And hence, it encompassed all the other arts. He knew that politics is a good and necessary thing. Now, our power as individual citizens is immense. We can shake things up by speaking up, starting a petition, organizing our neighbors, backing a candidate for public office, and I hope for some of you running for public office, and voting. The choices may not always be ideal, but as the last election demonstrated, part of our task is our duty to pick the best from a mixed lot and vote frequently. I don't mean for contestants on American Idol or voting people off the island. I've never done that, either one of those, by the way. We are called upon to vote for serious reasons each and every year. Primaries, general elections, special elections galore. Just be thankful you're in Texas. Our ballot is relatively short. Our good friends in California have to vote for so many offices and settle so many issues, it's a part-time job. By the way, if you want to quickly maximize your influence in politics, just organize all your family and friends to vote. My late father was a first-generation Irish American and damn proud of it. The O'Neill tie, by the way. He was a distinguished veteran of World War II and the Korean War. And after the war, he became something of an evangelist for liberal representative democracy. Not only did he never miss an election, but he carted many of our neighbors to the election polls. And he happily provided them with a list of preferred candidates if they happened not to be informed. The lesson, you too can become a political boss with your own political machine. Another lesson harkens back to what one of my former students labeled O'Neill's first law of politics. If you want to be influential in politics, you must be intensely interested, intensely organized, and have a long memory. And voting matters. Republicans now control both chambers of Congress. 8 years ago, it was the Democrats. The Republicans did not pick up the Senate until only 4 years ago. And I don't think I'm going to put my neck out by saying the Democrats are likely to pick up the House this November. How did it happen? People voted. Voting matters. And we know what happens when people don't vote. About 6 million fewer voters participated in the 2016 election than in the 2012 presidential election. And our best estimate is about 2/3 of the no-shows, the ones who didn't vote, were Democrats. Millions of other Democrats voted only in down ballot races and skipped the top line. In Michigan, where Hillary Clinton lost by 13,000 votes, some analysts estimate that 90,000 Democrats left the top line blank. And that's beside the fact that nationwide, 40% of eligible voters never showed up at all. So if you're a Democrat, don't blame the Russians or Fox News or former FBI Director James Comey or the Koch brothers only. Blame your fellow Democrats who did not vote for president. The problem of the no-shows also helps to explain some of the polarization affecting our lives. 1/3 of us typically show up to vote in primaries, oftentimes much fewer. And those who do show up tend to reflect the ideological extremes of their respective parties. Since the primaries choose who's going to be on the general election ballot, since the party activists, which dominate primaries, choose candidates who, not unreasonably, reflect their views and not those of mainstream America, the moderate voter has no real choice when it comes to the general election. Centrist candidates simply cannot make it into the final round. And so the moderate middle is largely absent in Congress and the White House. Yet, it is the moderates who are most open to healthy compromises, since they tend to be the most pragmatic and the least ideological members of our society. The lesson: if you want to change the world, organize and vote. Truth is, citizenship is hard work. We have to do our homework because mistakes can prove costly. We see our good friends across the Atlantic who made a decision to leave the European Union, a decision that many millions are trying to take back. Too late to save the economy or perhaps even the integrity of the United Kingdom. Judging by the large number of Britons who Googled, "What is the European Union?" after they voted on Brexit, some of the voters didn't know what they were doing, with enormous consequences. Now, the internet should make our task easier, though it's critical to seek out the facts before rather than after casting a ballot. But you also have to separate the good from the bad information. A tip: ignore the shrill, loud voices. The louder the voices, the more likely they are at least representative of everybody else in the room. Indeed, you can safely skip any tweet written in all caps. And I might add, you might just ignore most of the talking heads on cable news. Politics is important, but I'm the last one to say politics is all important. Politics is an important human endeavor, but I don't think I've said anything about art or wisdom or beauty or love. But I would like to claim that politics is something important and fun and serious. If we look at the Greek root of the word idiot, Dr. Haskell is going to jump on me on this one, our classics professor. But I recall it's something like the purely private person, uninterested and uninvolved in public affairs. So I guess my last lesson is, please don't be idiots. Take care of yourselves, take care of others. Now the fun part. Comments, questions, infuriating challenges. Just like a regular classroom, right? Florence and I probably are the senior teachers in this room. You know you have to wait sometimes 30 or 40 seconds. And I used to tell students, take your time. I get paid regardless if I'm not working. There's a glare, so I can't actually see who the people are. Whoever it is, what do you have? Oh, Eric Selbin. Always the first.
Hey, Cal, tell us why The Godfather. You've been teaching it for so long, so many students.
I think one of the secrets that every professor has that they don't like to make public is that when we first start to teach, we go back to think about the teachers that most profoundly affected us, including some of their devices. And the first time I was a TA at Berkeley, the professor was William K. Muir Jr. Everybody knew him as Sandy Muir. And Sandy eventually would become my dissertation advisor, so I was very close to Sandy. And he used The Godfather in his American politics class. And when I read it the first time, I said, great, this is a great book. All sorts of sex and violence in it. And then as I read it and thought about it, I realized one of the key kinds of political leadership is well demonstrated by Don Vito and Michael Corleone. What we call in American politics, the authoritarian leader who relies primarily on coercion. Oh, the Godfather does in strong arm when strong arming doesn't work. But when it does work, he'll go to it. It also teaches something about the relationship between leaders and followers. Hence the title, The Godfather. It's a paternalistic relationship, where the leader is the proud parent, but the rest of us are condemned to be children, to be subjects. And so when somebody starts talking about, sometimes a regime needs some strong leadership, and by that they mean some dominating top-down leadership, I always say be careful what you wish for. I, for one, don't want to be treated like a child. But that's also why I have the other two novels. All the King's Men, certainly, in my mind, the finest novel about politics ever written by an American, that teaches us the power of persuasion. And finally, The Last Hurrah, the old Boston city machine, where the Mayor Skeffington gains power and holds it by trading with voters. And notice in those last two, the trading relationship is a consensual one. Nobody can force you to trade. And so the mayor respected the fact that each voter had his or her own agency. And then, of course, there is Willie Stark, the governor of this unnamed state, which is really Louisiana because it's really Willie Stark. And I picked up on that one because when I was teaching at Tulane, Willie Stark's home was just up the road from Tulane. And if you know the novel, I'm doing too much here, Eric. You notice how he put a lot of money into the big state university, the one that his son was the running back for. And the story of that is that despite the fact that the governor of Louisiana has an ad hoc place on the board of trustees for Tulane University, a private university, they would not give him the honorary degree they had given to every other governor because Huey Long, Willie Stark, was a hick, a redneck. And so he decided, the hell with you, Tulane, I'm going to create a powerhouse university, Louisiana State University, whose stadium to this day is one of the great stadiums of all time. Enough? As somebody said very politely, you never have to worry that Tim O'Neill won't have something to say. Actually, Florence, you said that in one setting. Do you recall? We were, I believe, inducting a Phi Beta Kappa class, and you were the speaker at the event. And you said something about, the importance of what happens when you're in college that goes with you afterwards. And you called out two people who had been given a warning, so they had something prepared. And then you called out on me, and I didn't know it was coming. But you said, of course, he always has something to say. And the first thing I said was, this reminds me of pop quizzes in college. I feel the same terror. Yes, ma'am.
Sort of building on the theme of legacy, I'm interested in what attracted you to writing a textbook and what are some of your goals with that project?
Actually, you can blame some of our colleagues in the political science department. I don't know if I should call them out, Bob, Eric, but they thought my approach to teaching American politics was different from the conventional one and thought there might be some value to it. So once I had some time, by the way, I would like to thank Southwestern University for phased retirement. And anybody here who's faculty member, you really should think about it. In my case, it was 3 years where my teaching load was cut in half. Gave me a chance to slowly wean myself off the drug of teaching. But it also opened up free time to get some things done. And I thought, well, I'll use this time well, and I'll start working on that textbook. But as Dr. Condor knows, writing a textbook, as she has, a very successful textbook, the worst part about it is you have to deal with editors. These people are crazy. Other good questions? Amanda, what can I say? I'm sorry. I have to. You're next.
You spoke a little bit about moderates in your talk. We, in your classes, always talk about that as the great marshmallow in the middle of America.
Yeah.
And that seems to be missing right now for some of the reasons you described. Do you think there are opportunities for moderates to re-enter the picture in American politics? And if so, is there still an opportunity for them to maybe bridge some differences and fill in the middle between what I think is probably a pretty bipolar environment right now?
As Amanda is pointing out too, if you actually look at the distribution of popular opinion on so-called divisive issues, it's more of a bell-shaped curve with most people clustering in the middle and few on the extremes. And yet because of the primary system, who gets elected? The people on the extremes. So our politics in terms of its public appearance is far more divided than the actual reality of the population. I don't know completely the answer to that question. If I knew the answer to that question, I would not tell you. I would go out and sell it to somebody who would pay me big bucks. But I am thinking that the easiest way is just, well, what we'll do is we'll create a third party of moderates. But the fact of the matter is, voting is hard work. and moderates being practical, do a cost-benefit analysis. So as long as you have a primary system, I don't know if a third party of centrist is workable. I do know, though, there's reasons to be optimistic. Because when a party goes out of power, especially in a wave election, there is then a battle between those who say our problem was we weren't pure enough, and those who say unless we can pull in the marshmallow middle of America, we will never become a majority party again. And that's the sort of self-correcting nature of the system. Recently hasn't quite worked so well because we've had wave after wave after wave elections, so the system is very unstable. Although it will be interesting to see if this November is a wave election or a tailwind election. Wave election, candidates win not because of the fundamentals, but sometimes in spite of them. Tailwind is where a candidate really has to kind of work, but they have a lot of things working their way. If this is another wave election, polarization will continue for the next cycle. If it's a tailwind, you might actually see some moderates getting elected. And one of the lessons that some of the Democratic state parties have learned is the need to reach out and to identify people who can appeal to a Trump-like voter. I'm an eternal optimist. If you're a pessimist, you would commit suicide if you study American politics. You have to be an optimist. Yes, sir.
As long as I can remember, gerrymandering has been part of the political scene. And that depending on the parties that are in power, then the districts are gerrymandered. And I'd love to get your thoughts on the impact of gerrymandering on the ability of the moderate voter to have a voice. And really the genesis of it, and I know the Supreme Court is now looking at gerrymandering in several states, and kind of what your thoughts are on this whole gerrymandering and its impact on democracy.
I guess that was not my last lecture. And now I feel the need to speak for about 40 minutes on this. I will confess to you, my first job in politics was working with the political scientist who was putting together the map for the Republicans in California. Alan Heslop, Claremont, then Men's, now McKenna College. And then we had some very simple computer programs. And with it, we did a fairly decent job of carving out some advantages for the Republican Party, and the Democrats across the way were doing the same thing for the Democrats. But at that time, there were a lot more opportunities for moderates to find their way into it because this is before primaries. Little political history. The police riot during the Chicago Democratic Convention in 1968 resulted in the Democratic National Party deciding we have to select our delegates because otherwise it's going to be under the thumb of those big machine bosses like Mayor Daley. And so they looked for a way to make sure that the delegates, which of course are a surrogate for the party, would reflect the demographics of the party, male versus female, income, race, gender, and so forth. They also made primaries the primary way by which we select delegates to the National Convention. And that's why all of a sudden executive politics has become so polarized. Gerrymandering, of course, has been around since, what's his name? The governor of Massachusetts. Jerry, hence gerrymander. But because of the kind of computer power we have, it has really moved on. I'm usually skeptical of the claim that gerrymandering is an important factor in the polarization. Up until the last two elections, according to the experts, only a handful of seats actually were determined by gerrymandering. I think that has changed. So I guess the first thing I would do is I would ban primaries, And I would ask that the districts be apportioned by a bipartisan committee, not handed over to computer scientists who can use extraordinarily gifted talents to create division. Won't solve the problem, but could be a step in the right direction. So, but gerrymandering sometimes may simply be a symptom of the problem rather than the cause, at least in my obviously humble opinion. 'Cause you know me to be a humble person. I'm looking at the clock, and I just don't know how long I can hold you folks. You have lives and so forth. Maybe, Bob, one last.
So would you like to join me in thanking